Hello, I'm Dr. Pierre Samaan, and it's great being back with you. We've been starting in this new series about the ABCs of spiritual life, so I hope the last one you enjoyed. This one I'm sure you'll enjoy, and as we go through it, I'm learning things too. You know, you refresh your memory as you do research and you read about things, and every time I get into the Bible, and I'm sure it happens to all of you, every time I open up the Bible, and I read the same passage I might have read yesterday or a year ago, I'll get something new out of it. And whenever there's stress, whenever there's difficulties, it's always a good idea. Go back to basics. You know, when you start to feel a little heavy load on your shoulders and just kind of feeling a little discouraged, go back to basics. Go back to the ABCs. Refresh yourself in your thinking. When facilitating domestic violence groups, I could often tell who was going to make that dramatic change. And in the groups, you might have about 8 to 10, and I would do male groups, 8 to 10 men. And a lot of times you can tell, of course, they're all having a little difficulty coming in. Most of them have been court ordered to come in. And you can tell who's going to cooperate, who's not, who are going to be the tough ones, and who are going to be the ones that are a little easier to work with. But after that first session, very often you realize who's going to make that dramatic change. And usually you'll have, out of the 8 or 10, usually you'll have a couple of them that will make a dramatic change, and you have to ask, okay, well, what's different about them compared to all the rest of them? Well, they would be the ones who didn't know better. They grew up in a violent home. They didn't know any different for whatever reasons. I'm sure they heard the right way of having relationship, but it didn't sink in. They just didn't know any different. And all of a sudden, at a certain point in the groups, and the groups that I used to do were 26-week groups, court-ordered groups that were modeled after the Duluth model of domestic violence program. And you could tell about midway through, the light clicks on in those few individuals that didn't know better. And all of a sudden you see their eyes getting bigger and their eyebrows kind of rising up, and their heads kind of come up a little more, their chests are coming out a little more, and they're a little more eager now to talk about it. And they're soaking in this information that never, you might say, never got into them before. It didn't come in. It was heard. It went in one ear and out the other, but it didn't stick. It didn't come into them until that moment. And you'd see that and you go, wow, you know, he's going to do better, you know. And if his wife stuck with him or his girlfriend stuck with him, I would check with them later on, and they would do well. And generally the wives would be very happy, or the girlfriends would be very happy for those that were able to stay together in those circumstances. Happens to all of us in different ways, that things go in one ear and out the other. That's why it's important. Sometimes we need to go back to the ABCs, and that's what we're doing, the ABCs of spiritual life. We went through A, B, and C. Today we're going through D, E, and F. And D stands for discipline. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, Jesus said, if you have love and unselfish concern for one another. I want to emphasize that word, unselfish, because whether it's domestic violence, whether it's ingratitude, whether it's whatever it could be that is hindering a relationship, that selfishness, that self-centeredness tends to well up. That sense of entitlement that we have spoken of in that long series on the Jezebel spirit and the narcissistic personality, that entitlement wells up inside that person. And that selfishness, thinking of self. And Jesus said, don't do that. Discipline yourself to not do that type of thing. To know Him, to know Jesus, means to enter into a personal relationship that He makes possible. It's not just reading about Him. It's not just hearing about Him. It's that personal relationship that you have to enter into. That's part of the disciplining of your spiritual life. A disciple of Christ is expected to imitate the teacher. Any disciple imitates their teacher, their mentor, or whoever it may be, step by step. There's a saying, the dust on you represents how close you are to your teacher. And that's when they're walking in front of you, and the dust they kick up comes up on you, and you're all dusty, and it represents that you are imitating, you are going step by step as close as you can to your teacher as you walk along, which means you're gaining more, you're learning more, you're in closer relationship with them. And that's disciplining yourself in a controlled and habitual way. Can't be just now and then. It really needs to be daily. It's like another language to learn. And the Lord just kind of revealed this to me the other day. I wasn't even going to talk about it today, and here it comes up. Getting off on a little tangent. When we're born again in the Spirit, our spirit is made new. That spirit has a new language. That language is a language of love. If we speak love every day, we're learning this new language. And that love is speaking words that are positive, words that are encouraging, words that are good, speaking those words that build up, not tear down. And we've spoken about the differences between that part of the brain that holds the good thoughts and that part of the brain that holds the flesh thoughts, the negative critical thinking that comes out of the limbic system of the brain, that fight or flight center of the brain. Well, that's another language. It's the language of the flesh. That's the old man, as the Bible would describe our new creation. The new man is the language of the Spirit. Learning that new language takes work. You just can't learn a language by reading it or watching it online. You're not around enough people. I mean, I remember going to classes and language classes in high school and college, and it just wasn't very productive for me. But when I went to France to visit my relatives, take my mother over there many years ago, the French came back because I was all around French people, and they were all speaking French, and the language started to come back to me. And after 2 weeks, I was able to get around on my own and speak French and order in the restaurant and all these different things, and it felt pretty good. Couple of weeks after coming back, maybe a couple of months after coming back, it was gone because I wasn't practicing it regular. It went back in my mind somewhere. I used to dream dreams in French when I was younger. Really up until my 20s, I could dream in French, and I would think, wow, that's cool. I need to remember this when I wake up, speaking French. And it would, when I wake up, it wouldn't be there anymore. But it's still in there somewhere. Accessing it's difficult. As a Christian, the Spirit is in us. That's our spirit has been made alive. His Spirit comes in, dwells within our spirit, and we're hearing that language of love. And that's what He wants us to do, to discipline ourselves to speak that language every day. It influences others. It affects others in a positive way. Now, I can't always do that, but I practice it daily. I do my best. Sometimes something happens unpredictable and I get upset. I've learned to just be quiet, don't say anything, wait till I calm down, until I can get that language back up there again, that language of love. So this knowledge of the unselfish disciplining of ourselves as Christians is gracious and loving, but it demands a personal response. It's not just thinking it, it's doing it. Experience becomes a reality in our relationship based on familiarity with the person we're having a relationship with. So how do you have a relationship if you don't become familiar with the person or place or thing? Well, in Jesus, in our walk as Christians, how do we become familiar unless we learn, unless we take in the information, we hear what our spirit is saying in that language that it's speaking, and we practice it by experiencing the language and the relationship. And as we do with God, we do it with others as well. In the Bible, the story of Naaman the Syrian comes to a knowledge. It didn't just happen accidentally, and he was told what would happen, but he had to experience it. And in experiencing God through his healing of leprosy, everybody found out, and it changed Naaman. It wasn't the healing that changed Naaman. It was the obedience that changed him. Because had he not been obedient to the instructions of dipping himself in the river 7 times, if he hadn't been obedient to that, there wouldn't have been healing. It wouldn't have affected anyone. But because of the knowledge that he received, he formed a relationship, maybe a little relationship at the time, but it was a relationship where he obeyed the instruction. And in doing it, it changed his life and changed the lives of many people afterwards. That's our everyday life. When we're listening to our spirit, when we're listening to that language of love rather than rules and laws and statutes and whatever else, we're listening to that relationship language that God is giving us through that spirit, that new spirit in us. Things change. Well, the letter E kind of goes along with what we're talking about. E is for enthusiasm. The word comes from the Greek en, which en, and kind of sounds familiar. Meaning in, and theos, meaning God. En theos, in God. The manifestation of God in you, in me, will show up in different ways. Primarily enthusiasm. Well, what is enthusiasm? It's vitality, it's passion, it's inspiration, it's wisdom, it's forward looking, it's thinking ahead, it's problem solving, and so on. It's eagerly seeking or pursuing God. That's enthusiasm. You ever see a new Christian? I'm sure a lot of you remember when you were a new Christian, how the Spirit came in, the Spirit came alive to you, and God's Spirit entered in, and suddenly, wow, enthusiasm was there. And you want to get answers for prayer, you go to a new Christian and say, would you pray about this? Would you pray about that? Because they got that enthusiasm. And we all need to have that enthusiasm, and it's still in us. But over time, we kind of get a little low in our enthusiasm because we're not practicing it as much as those new Christians used to, or as I used to. So now I've got to work at practicing it more and more every day to keep the language going, to keep the language of love going. We have an example of that with Jesus. Jesus's passion, his enthusiasm for God, commanded him. It came out of him that he became so upset in the temple because of the money changers and the authority figures cheating people, making profits, not just a normal profit, but an exaggerated profit out of what they were doing. And what did Jesus do? He got upset. His enthusiasm, his passion, his pursuit, his seeking God, wanting to do right and seeing how wrong that was, anger welled up, and he chased them out of the temple area. Well, I'm not saying go chase people out of places, but I'm saying passion is there. The closer we have a relationship with God, the greater our passion is. And you can generally tell when someone's in trouble when they're not pursuing God. It's just a natural thing. It comes up out of us that we have to pursue God when God is in us. We pursue the relationship with him. And in pursuing it, we're speaking the language of God, that language of kind words, helpful words, loving words, words that encourage, words that give support, words of wisdom, words of knowledge, words of understanding, words that have insight coming out of them. That's the language of God. It's in us as believers. And if you don't have that, if you're not a believer, you can get it by believing in Jesus, by surrendering your will and giving up your selfishness, your self-centeredness, and letting him fill you, letting him make you alive in spirit, that new spirit in you, so more of him can be there. And that leads us to the next letter, which is F, because in doing that, we are exercising faith. F stands for faith. Jesus replied, have faith in God. And in that language, it wasn't just have faith yesterday in God, or have faith now, but it's okay, you don't have to have faith tomorrow. It's a constant faith in everything that you do. Have faith in God, Jesus said. He went on to say, now faith is the assurance. Assurance is like a title deed, a confirmation of things hoped for, divinely guaranteed. So I see here, I'm reading promises in the Bible. I'm reading these things that are being said. Okay, I'm going to have faith. I'm going to believe this is divinely guaranteed, divinely promised, and the evidence of things not seen, I can't see it. I'm reading it, but I don't see the action occurring, the conviction of their reality. That is, I have faith that I can get through the day honoring God, helping others, and in peace. But I don't see it happening right now. But I'm going to have faith. I'm going to trust it's going to happen. I'm going to believe it. I'm going to know that I know that's the way this day is going to turn out. The conviction of the reality that I'm seeing ahead, faith comprehends as fact what cannot be experienced by physical senses. I haven't experienced the rest of the day yet. I haven't had any physical senses of the rest of the day yet. But I'm believing in faith that's how the day's going to turn out. Well, in doing that, faith is coming by hearing. I'm speaking it and I'm hearing it. Same way with faith in God. Faith comes by hearing God's word. So if I'm reading it, I'm hearing it as I'm thinking it, or speaking it as I'm reading it, or hearing a teacher talk about it, or hearing the pastor on Sunday or Wednesday or whenever you hear teachings. And once you hear it, you still have to make that decision to believe. And the word believe basically is cling to, trust in. That's both hands, not just one. It takes both hands to believe. And if I'm believing, my faith is active. I'm demonstrating it just like Naaman the Syrian did when he believed, okay, I'm going to obey. I'm going to do it. This is what they're saying God says. All right, I'm going to dip myself in the river, even though this is foolish. I'm going to look silly. What are they going to say about me? All right, I'm just going to do it, because he said do it. He had both hands there, clinging to and trusting in, and he did it, and it worked. Well, just like the picture here of the mountain climber. I don't have faith to climb a mountain. I don't know if I was younger, if I ever had faith to climb a mountain, especially with no ropes holding me just in case I fall. But this guy's got faith. He's got faith to look up at that mountain and say, I can do that. I believe I can do that. And he looks at the mountain and thinks, well, I can do that because I've never done it before and it looks easy. And he's not saying that. He's going back. His thinking, his experience is going back. He's thinking of the experiences in the past, of those little hills that he's climbed in the past, of the trees that he used to climb, of the little higher than just a hill, mountainside that he climbed. And he's thinking about all these experiences with a mountain, with a hill, or whatever it might be, that tells him, I have faith, I can do this. I have experience, I have relationship in climbing. If I do that with God, my faith is going to grow. Faith is not a gift. It just doesn't come to you. It's not magic. You have to grow it. And to grow it, I have to have these experiences along the way that help me to grow it, just as the mountain climber does, that he can look and say, I can do this, and then he does it because he has experience in doing it before, little at a time, gaining the muscles and whatever else to be able to do it. Well, my relationship with God is similar. That letter F is very, very important in my walk, in all of our walks as believers. And it doesn't matter what religion you belong to, faith is going to be in there. It has to be there. My faith, my religion, my understanding of eternity and eternal life is based on Christianity, based on Jesus Christ as my Savior and Lord, and based on the fact that my spirit has been made new, born again, giving me a new language to think, to speak, to experience, a new relationship to have with God through Jesus Christ. I hope this was helpful for you today. If you got something out of it, press that like button, press the bell if you want to get notified for future programs. And just a reminder, here at New Horizons Institute of Counseling, we're for healing, peace, and harmony. We want to help you. And the Bible and are speaking that language not only helps us, but it helps those around us. God bless. We'll see you next time as we continue this series.